Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to those of you who are online to the meeting of the Future Oxfordshire Partnership. I'm first of all going to hand over to Kevin Jacob to do a roll call.
Okay. Councillor David Moraine.
I'm present in the room.
Councillor Bethia Thomas.
Present in the room.
Councillor Andy Graham.
Present and in the room.
Councillor Susan Brown.
Present in the room.
And Councillor Leslie McLean.
Present and in the room.
Thank you. That's all, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we have one apology for absence. That's Councillor Hingley, who's away at the moment, and Councillor McLean is here in his place, Deputy Leader of Cherwell District Council. So thank you very much for being here this afternoon. Do any of the members have any declarations of interest? No, thank you very much. So very quickly to say before we progress with the rest of the meeting, that this is a meeting of the Future Oxfordshire Partnership, but we are changing the nature of this partnership from being a wider group of people to being the leaders of the councils in Oxfordshire, and we will talk during this meeting about terms of reference for future meetings. But I just wanted to say at the beginning of this meeting, again, to those that have been part of this group over many years, thank you very much indeed for your invaluable contributions. Some of you, I think, may be online today, but we very much value the contributions that members of the FOP have made over a number of years. First of all, as the Growth Board, and secondly, as the Future Oxfordshire Partnership. So thank you all very much indeed for that. So just a few housekeeping notes. Welcome to everybody to this meeting of the Future Oxfordshire Partnership. Members of the partnership and supporting officers are present. In this case today, I believe all of us are here in the room. Can I remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed, and that meeting chat should be only used for messages about speaking or technical issues. No private discussions, but please do use the raise hand function if you wish to speak, although that doesn't actually apply to members in this meeting. There are people online who I think are participating in other ways. I would encourage everyone to ensure their microphones off if they're online, or fully muted when they're speaking. And those of you in the room, if you could use your microphones, that would be really helpful. And when speaking, if you're online, it would be really helpful if you could just give your name and your organisation. So thank you very much indeed for that. We'll now move on to look at the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 26th of November. And I'll page those for accuracy. If anybody has anything that they want to say, just put your hand up, please. So page in your pack, the first page of the minutes is page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14, and page 15. So if members are happy, I'll sign those as a correct record. Thank you. Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda is public participation, but I understand that we don't have any public who wish to participate today. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. In which case, we'll move on to the item number 4, which is the terms of reference for the Oxfordshire Leaders Joint Committee. And this is for us to take a decision on as those members of the committee for the future. So we are being asked to endorse the revised terms of reference. We have seen these before. I think we had a meeting, we had a discussion about this at our last meeting. And so I'd like to ask if anybody has anything that they would like to raise with regard to the terms of reference as they've been presented in our pack. Councillor Graham.
Yes, thank you very much, and welcome sight of these now. And just on 9.5, if we could just amend 9.5 on public speaking procedures, and I believe these are established, so we just need to change from will be to are established within the papers. And my second point relates to item 12, which is the funding contributions by the constituent authorities, and that is just to clarify that this has actually been ongoing and that it's at the same levels as previously. And if that's understood, I'd just like it to be noted.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask one. If so, Andrew, if you wouldn't mind responding to that, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Councillor Graham, thank you for spotting the point about the public participation protocol. You're right, it does exist. I think we'll probably just tweak those words to say that we'll review it in light of the changes, in particular because the end of the scrutiny panel means we may just want to check the terms of the details in there. So thank you for picking that up. That's very helpful. Funding contributions, yes, we've got a process in place that has been running for some time, and there's no proposal to change that at present.
Councillor Ruane.
On the second item first, on funding, at the last meeting, I think I asked for the breakdown between the different bodies that we were funding, because it comes as one figure. If we could have that, that would be helpful, especially in terms of selling it to my council. The other thing, just clarification, we're agreeing it today, but it then has to go through all our governance procedures, so it doesn't come into effect until it's adopted by each of the councils, so I assume. If you'd like me to talk about the funding briefly now. Yep. So the paper that we brought in November had headlines, and indeed you did ask for a little more detail. The headline is that each of the 6 councils contributes £100,000 a year. That funds the Local Nature Partnership, the Inclusive Economy Partnership, on which you have the annual report coming later today, and the Future Oxfordshire Partnership. In each of those, there is a manager who runs the show, and then there's a shared secretariat and comms team supporting all 3 partnerships. We don't explicitly calculate, down to the nth degree how the time recording works, but the best estimate that my team can give me is that each of the 3 partnerships consumes about 1/3 of the resources. It's a pretty even split. So therefore, the cost overall of the Future Oxfordshire Partnership component of that is about 1/3 of that 600,000, so 200,000. Very happy to give you more detail offline, but I think you've probably been asking the same question through South Oxfordshire District Council finance team, and I've given them a reply, which I hope they'll pass on to you.
Okay, thank you. Anything else anybody wants to raise on the terms of reference? Just to make it clear that you're quite right, Councillor Owen, this needs to go through the individual councils. And once those individual councils have agreed, which we hope they will, we will then change the name of this organisation from the Future Oxfordshire Partnership to the the Oxfordshire Leaders Joint Committee, and the members of that committee will be the 6 leaders of the various Oxfordshire councils. So that will come to that'll happen at the next meeting. So what we're asked to do is to endorse the revised terms of reference and the memorandum of understanding. And so I'd just like to ask if members are happy to do that. Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. That's really helpful. So that is the end of the Future Oxfordshire Partnership once we've agreed this through our councils. And we will then talk later on in the agenda about what the remit of this new group will be. So thank you all very much for that. So we will move on in that case to item number 5, which is the climate change adaptation route map. And Ariane and Tom, and I can see Sarah is also in the room. Thank you very much. I believe you've got a presentation for us. Is that right? Thank you.
Yes, we do. Thanks for the slides. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, it's working this time? No?
A little bit quiet.
Is that better? Yes. Okay, great. Okay, so I think you all know about the principle of climate adaptation. It's about improving our resilience to extreme weather events. And climate change is driving changes in our climate, which means we're getting a lot more extreme weather. So you can see there's some examples. Sorry, it's a bit small on the slides. But there's some examples there from Oxfordshire. So in 2022, there were 65 excess deaths from the heat wave. We've had severe water stress, or we're envisaging there will be severe water stress in Oxfordshire by 2040, but we're already suffering from regular droughts. And there are, sorry, I'm struggling to read it here. I need my glasses, sorry. And September 2024 was the wettest month in Oxford since 1774. And then a new temperature record was set in Oxford in July 2022, which was 38.1 degrees. And since 2007, we've had 16 periods of flooding, 9 major windstorms, 7 cold snaps, 6 heat waves, and 3 droughts. So clearly, we need to be preparing for these climate impacts. Next slide, please. And the economic damage caused by these climate impacts are really very significant. So through the piece of work we commissioned, we've had some calculations done, and we're estimating between 1 billion and 1.8 billion annual GVA loss by 2050, and up to 6.5% GDP contraction by 2070. The thing about the climate change is that there's a time lag. So whatever we do now on mitigating and reducing emissions, the impacts are actually locked in until 2040, whatever we do now. So you can see from that emissions pathway, there are different scenarios. The best scenario, which is the one at the top, the light blue one, assumes less than 2 degrees of warming. And the worst one at the bottom assumes 4 degrees of warming. So the impacts could be anything between those two by 2070. But by 2040, they're all very close together. So whatever we do, we are going to suffer those impacts. So we really do need to prepare. So I'm going to hand over to Tom.
Thanks, Ariane. Next slide, please. So I think what Ariane set out is kind of a very clear rationale for why we need the Oxfordshire Climate Adaptation Route Map. I think from the outset, it was understood that this needed to be a co-developed piece of work by kind of local Oxfordshire stakeholders through kind of a strong partnership working approach. And through the Future Oxfordshire Partnership, we've had a lot of kind of support and involvement from the outset. So back in January last year, the partnership agreed the final specification for the development of this route map. And also contributed significantly to funding the development process as well. And I suppose the overarching purpose of this this route map is really to kind of set out the actions that are required to enable Oxfordshire to become a climate adapted county. And I suppose the kind of key point is that we want to kind of really set out everything that needs to be done. Even though that's kind of challenging working across 5 different themes, we really wanted to kind of make it clear that these are all in the long term areas that need to be worked on. Next slide, please. In terms of the development process for the route map, we commissioned Sustainability West Midlands back in May last year. Sustainability West Midlands, despite their name, have been work with many different regions similar to ours, and have real expertise and experience on working on similar adaptation planning exercises. So we really wanted to utilise their experience, and then from then we've built quite a strong engagement process. So through setting up multiple workshops, both online and in person, we've really worked with local stakeholders to build their capacity on adaptation, so they can effectively input into the development process, and also giving them plenty of opportunity to provide insights into the kind of priorities that need to be in the route map. And these were followed up with a series of one-to-one interviews with stakeholders to get more detailed insights. And then the draft version, which was developed heavily on this engagement process, was circulated and shared with stakeholders through an extensive consultation period. And then from then we've received more feedback, which we've incorporated into the final document that we've shared for this meeting. So I think this has been a really strong development process. We've tried to take all kind of feedback on board from all stakeholders where it's been provided. And I think hopefully it gives us a really kind of strong platform going forward. Next slide. So the final route map really kind of sets out the extensive work that's needed on to enable us to become a climate adapted county in the long term. So it cuts across 82 different actions in total across 5 themes. But obviously those 82 actions a lot of those are into the long term. So we've really identified those kind of priority actions for initial implementation. So we've got 15 priority actions. And just to give you a flavour of some of those, there's a strong emphasis on enabling actions. So establishing a performance monitoring framework, establishing an adaptation working group with stakeholders. And there's also a big emphasis on capacity building and engagement, particularly with community groups and health and social care workers as well. And then also working to develop guidance for developers as well for kind of best practice adaptation measures. So that's just to give you a bit of a flavour of some of those initial actions we want to work on to start with, and then working on the larger set in the long term. So hopefully those kind of slides set out some of the key aspects of the route map. So that's all for me for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Graham, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks very much. My question really is about those priority action areas and the buy-in, the absolute sort of continuity of buy-in and engagement in order to ensure that the delivery of those actions over a period of time is actually part of the culture in actually seeing this through. Because if we don't have that as a robust mechanism in place, things are going to fall, and we've got to, in order to achieve those targets that you set out very clearly for us, I wanted to know really how that is going to be done, because it's the theory of what you've said I kind of really support and go with, but I think going forward we've got to actually have more robust reporting mechanisms on those priority areas. And those priority areas are going to be a large set of stakeholders involved in that. So it's how that's going to be rolled out. Who is the coordinator of those priority action areas to ensure we do that?
So really good point. Thank you, Councillor. And I think of those 15 priority actions, a lot of them are those kind of enabling actions which will provide that foundation for effective implementation. So through the working group, for example, which Oxfordshire County Council is in a position to kind of coordinate and take forward, along with the kind of performance monitoring framework. I think those are the two of the examples that will allow us to make sure that we're kind of on a firm footing in terms of the implementation of some of the other implementation measures.
A second point really is it's about the visibility of this through how the comms strategic comms I'm talking about now. How is that? Because in the eyes of the residents, they need to know that this isn't just a one-off. This isn't just a plan that they can easily forget about. It is something that we have to live by, and we have to ensure it's there in their eyes. So I wanted to ask, has anyone done any scoping on how strategic comms are going to be used to ensure that this visibility of ownership of these actions are going to be taken through? And if not, can that be taken offline in order to scope that?
Shall I just come in on response to that? I think we can take an offline action on that, but to just let councillors know about sort of progress so far on, sorry, I don't think I'm placed after the microphone, progress so far on establishing some engagement around this. So I think as Tom set out, that's at 2 scales. So we've done a lot of community engagement, looking at what
communities would say their needs are on communications around this, and we'll be developing a sort of community-led plan coming up through parish councils for agreement with local authorities. But I think the other side of that is how we bring ourselves together as an anchor network around adaptation, and the expanded partnership or the Zero Carbon Oxford partnership to the Zero Carbon Oxfordshire partnership, I think creates a really strong foundation for that work. So take on board the need to sort of integrate these pieces into an integrated engagement plan, but there's been some thinking and discussion on that to date.
Councillor Ruane. Oh, sorry, Councillor Thomas, I think. Well, I'll come to you first, Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was just seeking reassurance. I think this came about quite quickly for us. I think we hadn't had much of the build-up, and when it came out sort of late last year, we sort of pushed back and just said, oh, can we have a little bit more time to consider the different repercussions, budget, resources, all of that. So can you reassure me in the future that this is sort of like an umbrella sort of strategy, and that there will be some level of local organisation management of that? You talk about towns and parishes, local authorities, so I just wanted that sort of bit more clear. Thanks.
We went through, sort of prior to the agreement of the strategy, a number of iterations with colleagues in all the districts to try to get the right balance of agreement between colleagues. And I think the process we've taken has led to the priority actions coming forward and people having confidence that is the area we should work on together. I think of this report as being quite synonymous to the work we did together on the Pathways to Zero Carbon Oxfordshire report. So it's giving us this long-term pathway of which we've got to work together to bring some more of the activity within it to fruition.
Councillor Ruane.
Yeah, it's a really good piece of work and really interesting reading. Sorry, my train was cancelled this morning, so I'm in a bit of a mood. So I might be a bit more Eeyore-ish than I normally am. I'm just wondering how this gets from being a piece of paper that's really interesting to read to as actually being resilient to the sort of scary parts of climate change. So, for example, one of the priorities is to produce a county-wide climate change adaptation guidance for developers. Developers know what the problem is, but it's hard enough getting them to plant some hedges or not chop down a tree when they're doing a development. So how are we actually going to get them to implement that when the National Planning Policy Framework doesn't support putting any additional burdens onto them? And I picked that out as the most obvious example, but I think throughout the paper there are things that we all realise have to be done. My partner continually tells me that London needs jacking up 2 meters to lift it out of the sea, but nobody's ever going to do that. So how do we actually get this from it being a piece of paper to us actually feeling like we're, we might have a badge that says we're an adapted county, but how do we ever actually become a resilient county? Get a very big pay rise if you can answer that question.
So it's a challenging question. So you if you read the sort of Committee on Climate Change's response to some of the national adaptation policy, we are aware that there is significant policy feed-through gaps into things like planning that we can't necessarily solve as local authorities. But I think we do have significant opportunities in Oxfordshire, and what I think is useful about this strategy is it helps us to set out where we might find synergist opportunities with some of the activity we're doing in other spaces. So, for example, some really important, interesting work across the Cotswold clusters on nature-based solutions around infrastructure. So yeah, there is a major challenge with the limitations of planning, and part of this strategy needs to be how we might lobby regionally and nationally on that. But I think there are some opportunities that we have and that we could see emerging and that are replicable across the county, that we can take forward, particularly looking at that link between sort of biodiversity, nature, infrastructure and adaptation.
Councillor Brown.
Thanks very much. We've talked about planning. I was going to ask about the link between this and emergency planning, which is also a sort of obvious link. And having just had a really interesting talk recently, which Liz may be about to get, I'm not sure because it's on a course that I think she's doing as well, from Professor Lucy Easthope, who said that the most useful advice you can give people in terms of emergency planning is help is not coming. In other words, you know, prepare yourselves and be ready for an emergency disaster. It strikes me that this kind of is that. This is, you know, where we want to be, is getting our populations ready to understand what is coming down the tracks and getting them to help prepare themselves and their communities for that, so that, you know, there isn't a sort of need for, you know, the state to constantly step in and just do disaster recovery. We don't want to be doing disaster recovery. We want to be helping people to adapt. So that's a long way around of saying, what's the links between emergency planning and how's that working?
One of the pieces of work we've been doing in parallel with this with the University of Exeter is testing with communities some of their toolkits to help, as you say, localities understand what are going to be their major issues around resilience at a community level. Our immediate emergency planning colleagues would say that the major issue around this is more communities and businesses, in fact, developing their own resilience plans. So I think that is one of the priority work streams to take forward. And I know that's of interest to the county, particularly around flooding and how we might develop more sort of community-led approaches to flooding.
I think it's interesting hearing what we're asking here, because we're asking Sarah and Tom and Ariane to come up with solutions. But actually, I would like to suggest that that's the purpose of this committee now, that actually we are the leaders of the councils. And I think it's for us to say, well, actually, there are some things in this paper that we could be taking forward jointly. And I just refer us to 17, which says, implementation of actions will only proceed once funding and other resource requirements have been secured. Well, that's a challenge in itself. You know, how are we going to resource ourselves to do this? Because you know, the money's not going to come from anywhere that I can see at the moment to do this. So we have to think amongst ourselves about how we might take this forward. And I know that, I mean, we have just been talking about the budget this morning at the County Council and looking at significant sums of money that we'll be putting into flood alleviation and, you know, things like gully clearance. But there are other things around adaptation that I think we're going to need to think about, and how we work with some of the town and parish councils, particularly in our areas, to work with them, because at the moment that relationship is very strong between the districts and the town and parish councils. But I know, you know, the parish council meetings I go to, people aren't necessarily thinking around these things, and they do kind of expect us to, you know, produce sandbags and things like that. What can we actually do out of this paper that won't require a huge amount of funding but could make a difference? And I think that's really the sort of conversation that we need to be having. Councillor Thomas.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and I was just that's why I was sort of referring back to the local sort of side of things, and this may be sort of an umbrella sort of strategy, but we do need to make sure that within our own separate councils, and perhaps as a county, as sort of overall for parishes, that we have a sort of a say about what we think is most important and how we could engage in this the best. And yeah, budgets obviously being considered. The town and parish charter is perfect for you particularly to communicate with towns and parishes across the county. So for these sorts of things like gully clearance and flood response and all of that is important sometimes to some parishes more than others. I think if they're at the cutting edge of being flooded every time it rains, I think they're much more aware of that. So I think it's something that we have to think about carefully. about how we go forward and how we go forward as separate councils as well as collectively.
Yeah, I agree. And Councillor Graham.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much work that's already been done to get to this paper and to get to some of those recommendations within it. I kind of think as leaders, we have to take that on board, take it back, as you said, Councillor Thomas, in order to actually get the buy-in. Because I think it is important. This goes back to my point about how we engage and the visibility of that. But we need to then come back for a commitment to some of the key areas that have come back as a result of that, taking it back to our councils, but coming back with a really specific, because if we don't get specific and we don't actually tie it down, some of those priorities, they will just be on the paper, as Councillor Ryan said. So I kind of think there's a bit of processing work that officers that are with us today need to consider about that engagement bit, going back to our councils, coming back in order for us as leaders, therefore, to actually say, well, based on that, these are the key areas, this is the funding that's needed, and this is how we're going to actually attack that funding requirement. Because at the end of the day, you know, it will need funding, and we have got to find the means in order to do it. There's no way round it. We can't skate round it. And that is why it is a priority. These papers are of little value unless you do something with them. And I think going back to your point, Councillor Lethman, you know, quite rightly, we have to lead at the end of the day with actually taking it on behalf of our councils further forward, because if we don't, we are negating our roles and responsibilities as leaders, and that's my view. So hopefully that's a way forward.
Thank you. So you've given us some really good pointers here. So you've categorised 5 different areas that we need to look at. And I think, I mean, it may be that what we need to do now as a group is go away and think about which of those areas we can tackle ourselves and where we're going to have to work with partners. So I think you're absolutely right. You know, this is a really good paper and really good work. And thank you very much indeed for that. The question is, what do we do with it? And that's for us to decide at the end of the day. So I don't know, do people feel that we could maybe go away, have a think about this in our individual councils, look at, you know, what we can actually do individually as district and county councils, and come back and then, you know, have another discussion perhaps at the next meeting. I don't know, perhaps it's something to put on our work programme on a regular basis, because this is really important work. So how do people feel about that? Does that make sense? Great. Okay, thank you. I think that would be a really practical way forward. And then we can look at, you know, we can then start to look at what we need to do, how much it's going to cost to do it, you know, what partners we need to work with on it, etc., etc. So thank you. So we'll put that on the work programme for the next meeting. And thank you all very much indeed for a very thought-provoking and useful paper. Thank you. Okay, so item number 6 is the next item, and Emma, I think I'm right in saying that Emma and Jeremy Long, I think, are both online, and I believe you're going to do a presentation to us on the OIEP's annual report. Is that right?
That's correct.
That's correct. Thank you. So I'll hand over to you in that case.
I'm just sharing a slide. Hopefully you can see that.
That's come up, thank you.
Okay. Let me just. Brilliant. Sorry, I'm going to have to stop sharing for a moment because I can't see anything. One moment. Okay, I think I'm going to have to abandon the slide for the moment. It was just a slide of some nice pictures from various events we'd held during the year. And I don't think Jeremy's been able to join us. today, so I will.
Okay, thank you.
I will go ahead.
Okay, great.
Brilliant, thank you. So good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Emma Coles, and I'm the Oxfordshire Inclusive Economy Partnership Manager. And I'm here today to present our annual report. The aim of our partnership is to work together to create a more equal region, creating opportunities and benefits for all of the people within the county. We've submitted the annual report with 2 recommendations: that the Future Oxfordshire Partnership note the progress described within the annual report, and that the Future Oxfordshire Partnership notes the importance of continuing to support the partnership, which helps to deliver several outcomes of the Oxfordshire strategic vision. You'll see from the report that we've made great progress this year across our 4 priority areas of social value and procurement, employment, place shaping, and education. And it's key to note that the role of the partnership is not to necessarily deliver specific projects, but to convene the right people to enable the sharing of knowledge, expertise, and resources. And it's also around creating those links between different areas of work. Oh, thank you, Kevin. You will all have seen in the report in the agenda pack, so I'll just pick out a few highlights for each area. We're delighted to have reached 100 charter signees with a fantastic mix of public, private, and third sector organisations, all pledging to take forward actions to make their organisations more socially impactful. And this includes all 6 of Oxfordshire's local authorities, Thames Valley Police, and OUH Foundation Trust. Within our educational attainment working group, we've continued to build relationships and connections with health inequalities, trying to drive focus to prevention in the early years, which has led to the successful Early Years Summit which we hosted earlier this month in partnership with the University of Oxford, the County Council, and the ICB. And that brought together academics, practitioners, and businesses to look at what we could do to address early years issues across the system. Our inclusive employment work stream has been focused on supporting prison leavers and refugees into employment, as well as creating age-friendly employers. And we have added a selection of new cohorts to focus on over the next 12 months, which include care leavers, military and military families, the unemployed, and young people. One highlight includes the Crankstart internship from the University of Oxford, which focused on creating a toolkit for employers considering recruiting refugees, which was an outcome from our HR network seminar, focusing on supporting employers looking at employing refugees. Our social value and procurement working group has played a central role in aligning approaches to social value and procurement across the county, fostering collaboration among local councils, universities, health institutions, and other key stakeholders. And our place-based working group has focused on different topics, including successful examples of employment support, community hubs, and emerging issues regarding youth employment in Oxfordshire. And the outputs of these have created discussions and examples and best practice for other organisations, as well as supporting the work of the other 3 working groups. The place-based working group has developed a theory of change for the partnership, and that's a tool that graphically represents our objectives and how we're going to reach those through our intended outcomes. And follow-on work from that is some research capability that we've got coming, which we'll be looking at developing an impact assessment framework for the partnership. We've also been provided with over £90,000 of research opportunities throughout the year through a variety of programmes, as well as in-kind support from the County Council, providing a variety of placements to support the delivery of our projects. The development of an Oxfordshire Anchor Network now comes under the umbrella of the OIEP, and a variety of workshops across the system have helped to develop the priorities for that and the initial next steps. And we have held a variety of OIEP seminars based on relevant inclusive economy topics, as well as being involved in a variety of external events like the B Corp Festival, which was held back in September in Oxford, Oxprop, and the B4 Platinum Breakfast event. The highlight in terms of comms is that we've had a refreshing of our branding and comms, and we've used this to relaunch the charter, looking to build the number of charter signees, as well as raising the profile overall of the OIEP across the county. I'd just like to conclude by saying how grateful I am for the support that the partnership has from Becky Becky Cheshire for comms, and for Kevin in terms of supporting our steering group meetings. I hope that this report shows that the partnership is strong and valuable, that we have successfully leveraged additional resources from several sources, and that it's continued support to ensure the development of a more inclusive, and it needs continued support to ensure the development of a more inclusive economy in Oxfordshire. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you very much indeed for the very excellent report that you've produced as well. There's a huge amount going on, so you've got a lot to be very proud of, I think, Emma. Thank you. Any questions from anybody, or any comments anybody would like to make? Councillor Thomas.
I was just going to echo your words there, and the work of the partnership is it's inspirational, and it's very positive, and I think we're all, as you said, proud of being part of that and helping with that. So thank you, Emma.
Thank you. Yes, and really just to ask Emma, I mean, you've achieved an enormous amount in a very short space of time, actually, and I think one of the most impressive aspects of what you're doing is the number of local partnerships that you've created with businesses, but also with some of the educational institutions, etc. What do you think the next steps are for the OIEP?
In terms of next steps, I think there are various tranches of work that we're looking at. So obviously we're looking to continue building our base of businesses that we engage with and organisations through our charter. So that's going to be quite a key focus for myself over the next 12 months. And then really building the momentum around our HR network to drive inclusive employment practices across organisations. So we'll be looking to hold a lot more HR network events, engagement with more organisations to really start pushing those inclusive employment practices through the organisations. And then our social value work, especially through the Anchor subset. How do we creating that framework for Oxfordshire that we can hopefully help different organisations approach social value in a different way, provide those tools and information that will enable more people to do that, as well as helping drive that through supply chains.
Thank you. Any other questions for Emma? No, I don't think there are, Emma. Thank you very much indeed for that very excellent presentation, and as I said before, for the report. And we look forward to a continuing relationship with you as you move forward, and with all the other partners that have come into this as well, as I said, in such a short space of time. So well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next item on the agenda is the forward plan, which is described on our agenda as being the Future Oxfordshire Partnership forward plan. But of course, from the next meeting, we will be the Oxfordshire Joint Leaders Group. So I'd just like to open this up to members to consider what they would like to see on the forward plan, bearing in mind that we are looking at devolution, local government reorganisation, etc., which I think is going to be quite a focus for all of us over the next few months. So any thoughts about what we might want to include on the forward plan? Oh, and I have just said that we want to bring back the climate adaptation work to this committee as well. So we want to put that on, I think, on a regular basis. But is there anything else anybody would like to bring forward at this point?
I'm sort of reluctant maybe to really expand on this as much as we go forward. There's a lot of we're not quite clear what we're stepping into over the next couple of months. So I would be reluctant to plan ahead. We've sort of reset, and I would like just to take a pause and think about things a little bit further before we sort of put anything on the forward plan, except for those things that perhaps we're already working on.
Okay. Anybody else got any thoughts as to how we might handle this? How do we want to do this? Well, I think it's quite difficult at the moment, actually, when we don't know exactly what we're going to be asked to do. I mean, we have written to government and expressed an interest in moving forward with both devolution and local government reorganisation, but we're still waiting to hear back from the government, of course, at this stage. So perhaps it's a bit early to put something on the agenda, but maybe we just want to make sure we have some space to discuss that. So if we put that on, and then we can adapt accordingly, depending on where we get to. I think that's probably the sensible thing to do. Councillor Graham, you looked as if you were indicating at that moment.
Well, you've probably said it all now, really. I think it needs to come back to the next meeting, really, which will be our first meeting, subject to it passing through our councils, and we'll have a bit more clarity of local government reform in terms of guidelines. But I kind of think it just, you know, it is for the benefit of strategic work across Oxfordshire that we need to actually continue to actually highlight. And I think, as we said, the climate is coming back anyway, so we know that's there. And I think it would be well worth actually spending some detailed time on that to make sure that we give it some real credibility going forward. So at least we've got something there that we can actually move forward on.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm hearing is that people would like to keep it fairly fluid for the time being. And we'll have a look at the next meeting once we probably have a little bit more information anyway as to what the future is going to hold at the next meeting. So we'll think about what we want on our forward plan at that point, but we will put climate adaptation on there for the next meeting anyway. Are people generally agreed with that way of moving forward? Okay, that's fine. So in that case, we'll move on to item 8, which is updates on matters relevant to the future Oxfordshire partnership. I think I'm right in saying Paul Staines is going to give us a quick update on Oxis. Is that right? I don't know if Paul's online.
He is.
He is. Great. Hello, Paul. We'll hand over to you for a minute then in that case.
A minute is possibly all I need, Chair. Thank you very much. Good afternoon.
A minute or several if you want them.
But I do have some positive news about Oxis to advise the meeting. So we have completed a successful procurement and tender exercise to appoint a consultant. I take the opportunity, Chair, to thank County Council colleagues in procurement and legal who led this process with me on behalf of the partnership. The successful contractor is a company called Acon. Those with long memories for infrastructure things may remember they delivered the first iteration of the Oxfordshire infrastructure strategy, and they've worked elsewhere in the county as well. So they're quite experienced and knowledgeable in Oxfordshire, and I'm sure they'll deliver a good product for us. And we're in the throes, Chair, of agreeing with them a project execution plan. And that execution plan would see them completing their work, so us then to be followed with appropriate governance at our end by the end of October. So a 10-month project, a fairly ambitious timeline, I won't deny, and one that I'm currently asking partners to consider in the context both of the resource required for the data input work they'll need to do and also the timing of the consultations that are proposed, whether it fits around their current business plans. So I hope to get that information back to ACOM by the end of this week and then moving forward. That's pace. We would expect a draft strategy at the end of May, beginning of June. So perhaps the leaders meeting, as it will be configured then, which is approximately at that time, perhaps, will receive that draft strategy. And the final strategy will be sometime after the end of October. Happy to take any questions, of course, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions, anybody? Councillor Graham.
Yeah, I was just, sorry, I was talking across to my chief executive whilst you were talking, but I was multitasking really just to actually pose the right question to you. It really was about the scope really of infrastructure, because one of the failings of infrastructure strategy, generally speaking, has been the lack of joined up approach really in terms of our needs of our residents and our communities. And I kind of think what will be interesting to be reminded of is the scope of that project that you've just outlined, and how that the big question that is constantly being asked of parish councils and communities is, where's the joined up thinking in infrastructure when you look at roads and health infrastructure, you know, the soft infrastructure, as opposed to the hard, obvious, you know, infrastructure like roads and transport and railways and things of that sort. They actually are all embedded. That makes a community sustain itself and work, or a set of communities work across the breach, really. And I know that in terms of devolution going forward, this question will be needed to be addressed. And I just wondered, knowing that we've got local devolution and combined mayoral authorities, where infrastructure will fit, which I tend to think it will obviously go into the mayor's combined authority, and how this work going forward will help to inform that going forward.
So, Chair, I'm sure Councillor Graham is wise in noting the connection between the output of the Oxfordshire infrastructure strategy and devolution conversations that may take place, however we may configure ourselves, because Oxis is likely surely to be one of those data sets that we use to have the relevant conversations with government. And when Oxis worked well, as the first iteration is generally felt to do, it may not have been there may not be a causal link between that and its highest priority project at that time, which was Oxford Station, or between that and the successful growth deal that was negotiated with government. But it did provide us with a unified voice about what was strategically important in the infrastructure world for us to have with government and other funding organisations. And that's pretty much what I think we want to achieve this time round. I think it's important for us to remember that we are absolutely not replicating local planning authorities' infrastructure delivery plans. We're looking at big ticket strategic items. And one of the first key things we've got to do is decide quite what that means. What's the definition of strategy, and is it actually pitched high enough for us? So that's a very important aspect of it. The point that Councillor Graham makes about joined up infrastructure, well, all the iterations of Oxis have always set out to capture the full population of infrastructure requirements for the county across such issues as health, energy, water, green infrastructure, blue infrastructure, etc., etc. They've been varyingly successful, and some councillors may remember that there was a feeling that the last Oxis was rather focused upon transport, although a lot of that was active travel. So if we get this right, Councillor Graham, we will be able to point to the fact that we have particularly focused on those areas, and I wouldn't use the word deficit, where perhaps Oxis wasn't able to detail what we wanted to in previous iterations. And time will tell whether we're successful with that. One of the conundrums with Oxis, of course, is that it ultimately looks to capture and then assess various infrastructure projects, and things need to be worked up to a degree that makes them accessible and able for that to happen. And that's always been the challenge for previous iterations. I'm hopeful that things such as the local area energy plan or the 100 Together work is going to mean that there's a level of granularity in some of those areas that we've struggled with in the past that will make this a much more rounded strategy when it's complete. But time will tell.
Well, I think just picking up another point that you made, the question is, you know, if we're going to be looking at this from a mayoral authority point of view, actually, I think it gives us the opportunity to drive that in ways that probably some of our potential partners can't do. So I think it's really important that we do take this forward, and some of those issues will be shared by other counties as well. Things like, for instance, you know, the lack of grid connection and all those things that we would need to look at as part of the Oxis. So I think it's really important that we do take this forward and we have a picture for ourselves as Oxfordshire, but also one that can be widened across the mayoral authority when it's established. Thank you very much, Paul. Any other questions from anybody else or any other comments that anyone wants to make? Okay, well, we look forward to seeing you back with us shortly in that case. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Under this item, I just wanted to remind people, I mean, we've all been party to the discussions that have happened around devolution and local government reorganisation so far. All of you, I think, were in this room at one point or another, either that or online, talking about when we had the cabinet meeting to decide what to do about the devolution white paper. And I have mentioned earlier in the meeting that this is likely to be a topic that we will want to address as part of these meetings in the future. But just to say that at the moment, we haven't had any further indication from government as to what their plans for us might be, or whether they are going to fast track this county, or whether they're looking at, you know, we really don't know. And until we hear back from them, which I believe will be sometime this week, there's nothing much further to add, really. But we are given to understand that there will be some form of communication with us sometime this week. So unless there are any other questions on that, there's not much more to say, I don't think, at this stage. Thank you. Is there anything else that anybody would like to update the future Oxfordshire partner with at this point? Anything else that's relevant to us that isn't contained in the next item? No. Okay. In that case, the next item is verbal updates from strategic partnerships, and there's a couple that I know we've had meetings with recently. One of them is England's Economic Heartland, and David, Councillor Ruane, you're our representative on that. Would you like to give us an update from the EH meetings that you've been at?
Yes, we've had 2 meetings, I think, since we last spoke. On the 5th of December, there was a meeting in Bedford which had a very full agenda, but a lot of the things we were looking at were specific area network inquiries. So, and most of them were over at the east end of the area. So, looking around Cambridge area or whatever. So, not specifically relevant to us. There was a report on the National Transport Strategy and the bus symposium to update us on what had happened there. And there was a specific item to adopt the environmental programme that had come out of the Pan-Regional Partnership, which I think generally recognised as one of the better pieces of work that the Pan-Regional Partnership came up with. So we're happy to adopt that. Then on the 17th of January, we had a presentation on the National Wealth Fund, which is a fund that local authorities can access for capital work. There are criteria for applying, and I think some members were particularly trying to get information ahead of applications on their own specific schemes. So yeah, I think we all came away knowing quite a lot about Luton bus, guided bus plans. But having checked with officers at my council, they were already aware of the Wealth Fund. I'm sure that most of our officers are. If they're not, then you can look it up. It's an alternative to the Public Works Loan Board as a source of funding, as a loan rather than a grant. That's it, I think.
Okay, thank you very much. And we also had, I think, the conference for the Pan-Regional Partnership. Councillor Graham, I know you were there, and so was Councillor Brown. So I don't know if you'd both like to give us an update on that.
Right. Okay, thanks. Firstly, just to say that the conference was really well attended, number one. 2, I think there was a possible, fairly fulsome support for the work that the Pan-Regional Partnership had undertaken in challenging times. And really, some of the work that has actually and is still in the process of being rolled out will continue in some form or other. and we wait to see. I think the challenge is always when governments are sort of hanging over the question of whether the future of these organisations are going to continue or not, and then suddenly it sort of pulls into doubt, rather unfairly, what the future is. But I think the Pan-Regional Partnership Board has done a good job at looking at legacy and really how to take these things forward should the government take that position of withdrawing from it. But that may not be the case. We wait to actually hear those announcements. I think it's an organisation really that aim to work across the whole area, a significantly different area, because it's not just Oxfordshire, it's also right from here across to Cambridgeshire, and we've all actually bought into different aspects of the work that has been done by the Pan-Regional Partnership. So I think there's not much more I can actually say about that at this stage, but let's wait and hear from the government, and it's in a good position to go forward, but equally it's in a good position to actually hand over the reins appropriately, so the investment that has been put into it by all the authorities is not lost, and it has been a well worth investment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, thanks. I'll just add a little bit, if I may. I remember the day well because I arrived full of cold and discovered on my arrival that I was due on the platform to speak, something I wasn't aware of until that point. So that was a great start. However, I got through it. So that was all exciting. But it was a really good meeting, apart from my contribution, which may have been less good than otherwise. But and I think it is a testimony to the work that has been done over a number of years now, that there was a really in spite of the doubt that was then around about the future of the Pan-Regional Partnership, and as Andy's quite rightly said, we still don't know for certain because the government has not yet formally responded to say what the future is. There was a strong feeling in the room that the work did need to carry on, and but also that the partnerships that were already in existence and the work that was already ongoing needed to carry on, because there is such strength in the partnership and such a lot of commonality, and importantly there is a huge engine for growth across that whole patch, from Oxfordshire to Cambridgeshire, and also a huge amount of really good work that's been done on climate change and adapting to climate change and biodiversity, and we don't want to lose any of that. So I think we, as Andy said, await to see what happens next. But I think there's still a future for the work, and we'll see if there's a future for the partnership as well.
Yes, and I remember being asked by somebody at the conference. Somebody said, "Oh, I see you're speaking today," and I said, "No, I don't think so." And then it turned out I was, like you. But yes. No. Anyway, thank you very much for that. Is there anything anybody else would like to update us on? Okay, in which case we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the date of next meeting. So you'll see that some dates have been proposed, and I suggest we put these in the diary and then adapt accordingly, depending on what the future brings. So thank you very much, everybody. There is nothing else on the agenda. I'll just ask quickly if there's any other business that anybody would like to bring to the meeting. No, I just see shaking heads. Shaken heads. There's nothing we've missed out. So thank you all very much for being at the meeting today, and I look forward to seeing you at our next meeting in